Barry, I'm going to start off with a quotation from you. Human connection, consultation, strategic thought and debate, and evolving laws. What I find great is we all now have Zoom, we have MS Teams, we have swanky computers, cell phones, but here we are in person. And I think that is the value, is the human connection that we all still have with one another. And before I start with my presentation, I'm thinking about if you practice law, the first thing you always do is you consult. And consult is an interpersonal reaction between two people more often than not. And I think that's the cornerstone of legal practice. You have a whole stack of tools and all these things that you see on the walls around you, but they all follow an initial consultation, and that is the human interaction. And I think Barry touched on that now. I think that's really valuable. So for me to kick off with, it's a tough act to follow, Barry, but I'll start with this picture. So needless to say, I asked AI to generate an image for me of what a traditional law firm looks like. And this is what it came up with. And I don't know, I kind of relate to that, but maybe my age speaks to it. And I was saying the other day, people were complaining about the price of technology. All these things you see around you cost some bucks, you know. But try and bind those books at the back in calf's leather. Then you'll see what real pricey legal tech is from that era. But anyhow, so that's the image that was conjured up for me by AI. But today we're going to talk about the next frontier of legal IA and embracing the agentic model. I'm George Findlay and I'm from LexisNexis. So the next frontier of legal AI and embracing the agentic model. Those are words that are all kind of new. But we learn them rather fast. I think, for instance, of 5 years ago in the middle of COVID, in a very short space of time, we learned a whole stack of new terminology, from PPE to social distancing to, Zoom and MS Teams, lockdown, rat tests, all of that kind of stuff. We learned really quickly. And just like we learned that stuff in COVID, so we're learning now in the AI space about machine learning, natural language, LLMs, chatbots, and hallucinations, not in the drug sense, but in the AI sense. So the question that I want to ask today is, do you relate to this scene here, or do you rather see yourself as this guy with the slick hair and the vinnige brille, as they say here in Durbanville? So the question is, do you relate to them? So what are we going to do today is we're going to chat in my agenda, a little step into the past, step into the future, look at the legal innovation, intelligent systems of today, and systems that reason autonomously. But a step into the past makes me think, those of you with although you needn't have children to have watched a film called The Incredibles. In the movie The Incredibles, there's that auntie, Dame Edna Mode, with those big black framed spectacles. And one of her lines, which I love about stepping into the past, is, "Don't look back, darling, it detracts from the now." So, but looking back is important, and I am going to tell you a quick story that I told to Tersha earlier today about looking back. They say you shouldn't go back to your childhood home. So I grew up in Pretoria, and my parents lived in that house that I grew up in for 40 years. And it was a big sort of Victorian mansion, and it was rather pretty, and it was sort of furnished in an old-fashioned style. A couple of years ago, I looked back, darling, and I went back to our house. It was a Thai massage parlor. So, the question is, I know, was it a good thing to go back there? I'm not quite sure. But be that as it may, we're going to start. And Barry also did a history lesson. I mean, lawyers are inherently historians. in any event. So we're going to do a bit of retrovidere, which means to look back. For those of you who did not Italian, but Latin at university. We're going to do a little retrovidere to look back. And similar to Barry, I'm going to chat to you a little bit, the pre-digital era, paper, books, and manual labor. And what is the pre-digital era? It's kind of pre-1970. And it's remarkable for me, I mean, from a paleontology point of view that Barry was alluding to there with the Australopithecus. In law, very little happened since Mrs. Pless or Justinian until about 1970. I think of Julius Caesar back in the day, Justinian. The biggest piece of tech that happened before 1970 was the Gutenberg press, being able to generate volume of stuff. As for the rest, very little happened. Maybe up until about 1970, you had a little bit of dictation stuff. Cassette tapes, they were initially like big reel-to-reel things, and they became progressively smaller and smaller and smaller. And those of you, I don't know if anyone still uses dictaphones that are about this size. But that was the pre-digital era up until about 1970. Carbon paper, large filing cabinets, and like I said, dictation was possibly the earliest piece of tech. And then the next wave was sort of 1970 to the 1990s, and that's when digitization began. I find it kind of scary I mean, it feels like a long, long time ago, but I mean, that's within my adult life, or portions of that era. But you know, one of the first sets of digitization of legislation and case law happened in the United States. The automation and digitization was in 1973 in America. And interestingly enough, a bit of a brag thing, it was LexisNexis that did that in 1973. So, I mean, that's really rather exciting. And like I said, even within my era, I mean, I started my articles in 1988. I mean, it is quite long ago. But there was no tech. We had a room. There was a special room which you needed to request access to because in that room was the fax machine. So the thing is, I mean, what I wanted to say a little bit earlier about don't look back, darling, it detracts from the now, is the important thing is to look back, is it makes you appreciate how adaptable we are. And the legal profession has this reputation of being reluctant to change and being stuck in a groove. But just in your own lifespan and in your own working time, think of the incredible evolvement, is there such a word, that has happened in your space. In my lifetime, and I'm maybe a bit older than most of the people here, that story of mine with the fax machine. There was one word processor in the entire office. I was at a law firm with about 85 people. There was one word processor which we generated some contractual work on. And that is just in my lifetime. So in your own lifetimes, in your own working life, don't think that you're stuck in a rut and reluctant to change. It evolves faster than you think. Right, let me just quickly, these things are dying on me here. And then, of course, in the 1990s, the internet came. Email usage just ramped up. Who was it that mentioned email? I think it was Aziz, who was saying it sort of was a new thing. But now it's absolutely part of everyone's working day, and that goes back to the 1990s. Then the second wave. If the first wave was then, we had Mrs. Pless there in the pre-digital era, and then the first wave, and then the second wave, 2000 to 2010, automation in the cloud. I mean, that's 10, 15 years ago. Practice management software like the AJSs of the world, e-discovery tools, and the start of due diligence and KYC, all of that was happening during that time. And then shortly thereafter came 2010s to 2020s, predictive and analytical tools. So in the United States, you have predictive modeling, where you can determine what the outcome of a case might be. You have lots of help with e-discovery and the like. And of course, legal research has become massive and massively easy. again, I'm going to do a little bit of a pitch there and say, of course, LexisNexis was the front line with respect to that. So all of these are fancy systems, and they're all sort of adaptive, but all these systems are reactive. You ask it to do something, and it gives you an answer. They're all reactive. And that brings us to the next frontier, and that is the agentic model. See these new words we're learning, like COVID. So we learned about the AI, and now we have the agentic model. And what is this really about? The agentic model are systems that can interpret complex tasks. They can break them down into subtasks and issue them across multiple platforms and so on. But basically, they're finding creative solutions to problems. They learn, feedback, and adapt. So what does this all mean? I'm going to think of that's what I just said. Think of an analogy. So up until now, the way we have all been using Google as an example, or even your ChatGPT, is a little bit like a calculator. You punch in the problem, and it spits out the answer. So it's like a question and answer kind of scenario. The difference with the agentic model, and that is another way I can put it is like the thinking model, is you ask it a question, and it then researches, drafts, and cites selected arguments. I'll give you an example. Just in this last week, I put into the LexisNexis Protégé model, which is the new model within the LexisNexis library, about an application for curatorship. It's like having a really together smart paralegal who does the research, finds the citations, does recommendations all in one go. So you put in the basic requirements for an application for curatorship, and then it spits out everything that you need, from jurisdiction requirements to the 2 affidavits you might need from the legal practitioner, at least the medical practitioners for your curatorship application. So it really, really is super powerful. So these agentic models, what does it look like in a practice? Well, it does a few things. So I say the legal research, it drafts, monitors the case law, and checks the precedents. Importantly, and I'm going to talk about that shortly, and that is about closed models of large language models and open models of large language models. So legal research is super slick, super quick. Similarly, drafting and review, if you think in the past, in fact, Barry showed that drafting and review of those contracts really is remarkable how fast it can do. If you currently give your PA something to draft, you're going to edit till the cows come home. Now, of course, you don't have to do that anymore. And so similarly to decision support. So decision support, similar to what I said earlier, like in the United States, doing the predictive modeling of outcomes of matters that you might be dealing with. And then lastly, workflow orchestration is having a system that can speak to AJS and can speak to Legal Serve, being able to orchestrate communication between all your systems and ultimately to your clients as well. So that's really where we're kind of heading. So the paradigm shift you have to make is your tools that you currently use, I believe, become your teammates. They're not just tools that you have, but they're your teammates because they take initiative. Your efficiency becomes intelligence, so it's smarter, it reasons, prioritizes, and explains, hence efficiency and intelligence, and then goes from static to adaptive. And I'm going to quote Azar. Azar used the line to say, the AI systems learn, reason, and self-correct. So it's not just spitting out an answer, it develops over time to learn, reason, and self-correct. I spoke a bit earlier, or mentioned earlier, that I'm going to talk about large language models. So at LexisNexis, we've got 2 things. We've got Lexis Plus AI, which has this Protégé, which is the AI portion of it, and then we're using AI in our KYC platforms as well. But I want to stand still with I mentioned about hallucinations, not in the drug sense, but in the Mavundla case kind of sense. So again, Azar mentioned the Mavundla case, and that is where there was hallucination. And where does that come from, and how does one combat that? And it's not just the Mavundla case. My colleague Leanne sent me a message. News 24. The use of artificial intelligence in legal filings has landed more lawyers in hot water. The Gauteng High Court in Johannesburg has referred a team of lawyers to the Legal Practice Council after they included 2 non-existent case citations in their heads of argument. While the court found no intent to deceive, it warned that the lapse could still amount to professional misconduct. 3 days after that, published in the Daily Maverick, was AI hallucinations are threatening the administration of justice in SA. Flippin' interesting. So, how do you deal with that? So at Lexis, we've launched Protégé, and Protégé runs off what we call a closed large language model. So what is that? Barry used the chocolate cake analogy. So if I ask LexisNexis Protégé to draft me the basics of a curatorship application, or what's the essentialia of an Anton Piller application, it will tell me that. If I asked Copilot, it might also tell me that. If I ask Copilot or ChatGPT for the recipe for a chocolate cake, it will also tell me that. If I ask LexisNexis Protégé for the chocolate cake recipe, it won't tell me that. And the reason is because LexisNexis Protégé uses a data set which is restricted for the purposes that it's designed for. And that is all the data sets globally that are the legal data sets, where the legal citations are kept, where the case law is kept, where the legislation is kept, where all the legal academic publications are kept in a closed, ring-fenced scenario. So that's the closed LLM. So when you ask the Protégé to draft you something or to give you the basics of your Anton Piller application, you know that the source material that it used is ring-fenced as legal source material. As opposed to using an open AI platform, you don't know where it's all coming from, and that's where the hallucinations come from. So the message I want to give to you is make sure that you use a platform that is a trusted source, that the data that it uses comes from a trusted source. And that's really the difference between the large language models that are open-based as opposed to closed-based. And that, to me, is a very important distinction as a legal practitioner. So, Marie, are you showing me a... Not yet, okay. We all are fascinated by this AI stuff. And Barry was also becoming quite philosophical there. And I read an article in the New Yorker, and in there they were asking whether the use of AI makes us lazy thinkers, and whether your brain activity becomes a little dumbed down because of your use of this technology. So they did a test, I think it was the university at MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, where they took a sample of youngsters and they asked them to write a piece, and it was something banal or mundane about, like, does chocolate enhance my sense of well-being, as an example. The first set of people, they said, just use your mind and write what you think and feel. The middle set, they said, okay, you guys can use Google. And in the other set, they said, you can use all the tech in the world, all the AI technology to write this piece of whether chocolate enhances your sense of well-being. And then they connected a whole stack of brain probes on these youngsters to see the brain activity while they were doing this thing. So the ones that showed the most brain activity, of course, were the ones that weren't using any of the technology. They're the ones that were truly applying their mind to the question, and the ones where there was the least activity was this group set that had access to all the technology. And that, to me, tells an interesting story. And if I think as lawyers, and I wrote down this piece that says, in law, the foundation of litigation is the existence and debate of divergent opinions. So that's the foundation of litigation, is debate of divergent opinions. One of the things that these large language models do, and I know I embrace them at LexisNexis, and I've been critical now of them, is they average everything out. It's all based on averages, and there's no divergent opinion. And I think we have to be cautious of that. And it relates back to what Barry was saying about consultation and the interaction between people. The divergent opinions do not exist inside these large language models. Like I mentioned, it's an averaging out of everything. And for that reason, one of the lines I often used to use in the past is I used to say that if two lawyers agree, the one wasn't thinking. So, and that's really quite important, because ultimately, these large language models, they look at these patterns, they average everything out, and I want to leave you all with a couple of thoughts, and that is, don't outsource your thinking. That way you will become average. There are a few lines that kind of spoke to me. It said, don't let the AI override your own voice. Don't lose authorship identity and your writing style. And don't lose your own authenticity. Don't lose confidence in your own writing. And don't be hypnotized by AI. So, ultimately, you're the author of everything, and use the tools and embrace them, and they are superb guidelines. But I always believe that if you write something, I always used to say, it must smack of you. It's got to be something that you are, and you be the author of that, because that's ultimately what you all are, is you're all authors. And remain authentic and maintain your own authorship skills. Use the tools, they're important. And to close off, I'm going to just say that you need to embrace these tools. You need to have a policy within your firm on how you're going to embrace these tools. Don't be scared of them. And there are a whole stack of people, ourselves and all these others, that embrace these tools that will help guide you through this journey. As Zara was saying, there's no legislation in place, so tread carefully, self-regulate, and make sure that you adapt it, but you adopt it, but with caution, but maintain your authenticity. And I'm going to leave you on that note. Thank you very much.